Hey guys, do you know someone considering renting their property as an Airbnb? I have worked with Rental Advisor for over a decade, and Rental Advisor provides free rental projections to prospective owners, realtors, and investors for any property in the US. So if you know someone considering getting into the vacation rental industry, have them email management@myrentaladvisor.com to get their free revenue projections. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to today's show. I'm sorry if I look a little different than I normally do. We were running into a bunch of technical difficulties, so I am doing today's episode from my phone. So that's why I look weird. But anyway, today I am joined first and foremost by my co-host, Hayden. Carol, Hayden, how you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Good. And we are joined by our special guest, the Ubermormon.
The
That's
Ubermormon.
the name of Cody's channel. Cody, tell everybody a little bit about yourself real quick, just a quick little bio and how this all came about and why we're talking today.
Yeah, so I started my channel about 7 months ago, mostly because if I'm going to get very specific about it, I read James Fowler's Stages of Faith, and it was one of the most helpful things that I'd ever read after having left the church. I guess I should start with that. I'm not a member anymore, and that book was revolutionary for me. I thought it was incredible, and I didn't see anybody else talking about it. And I just kind of hoped that somebody would, and then eventually realized that I had to take the mantle on myself. And so I literally started a channel with the idea that I would just make one video, and if it goes well and if it was fun, then I would make more. And that one video would be James Fowler's Stages of Faith. So I made that video, and it was really fun, and it helped me organize my thoughts. And then I just started doing it more and more. And so I'm a psychology student. I'm trying to become a social worker. I want to do therapy with people. And so as I was learning things in school, I started to connect it to just the process of kind of walking through this faith crisis. And so I figured I would connect those two dots and make videos about it. So that's pretty much what you find at my channel.
Awesome.
Is a blending of psychology and whatever this is.
Very cool. Hayden, do you want to talk a little bit about how you ended up meeting with Cody and kind of what how we all ended up getting connected through you?
Yeah, it was the YouTube algorithm that connected us. I can't remember. I had the YouTube app open on my phone, just on my homepage, and you had a live stream going with a friend of yours named Tracy, I think her name is.
Yeah.
And you guys were doing a little review, kind of like how would you describe it? Like a humorous review of the Book of Mormon videos?
A sassy review. Yeah, that's probably the sassiest I get is watching those Book of Mormon videos.
Yeah. So anyway, like the newer ones that are still coming out, and I have my own opinions on those. So basically what happened was I saw it was live, and I saw something about Book of Mormon videos, and I'd never seen his channel before. This was probably a month or two ago. And I didn't know if Cody, if you were active or if you were a former member of the church. I didn't know anything about you. So I clicked on it, and I kind of gauged the room, and I kind of guessed that you guys
quickly figured out that I wasn't.
That you weren't, pro LDS.
Right.
And so anyway, I started typing in the live chat some provocative messages about,
Getting
this
sassy
is an echo.
too, huh?
Yeah, like
something
like this is, I can't remember, like something like nice echo chamber or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
And I said I'd love to come on, right now. Like,
this is how naive I am. Just really quickly, at first I thought you were commenting on like our sound was bad. That was the very first thing I thought was like, not that I don't know what echo chamber means, but I was like, oh, is there an echo? I haven't streamed a video like this before. So that was the first thing I thought. And then I realized that your motives were a little bit darker.
Yes. So anyway, I was trying to get his attention. I said, hey, if you have a link, send me a link. And I'd love to chat. And we did end up chatting that night for 15 or 20 minutes. My camera wasn't working on my phone. So we chatted for a second, and then we actually got on again and on a video chat, and we chatted for an hour or more. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we've known each other, and it's been a very friendly relationship and very, very cordial, and I've enjoyed it. So anyway, we just figured it would be fun to get him on the channel and have some more conversations with us.
Yeah. My take is I kind of saw some of that interaction, and I started watching some of your videos, Cody, on the Ubermormon, or Ubermormon on YouTube is the thing, and I know that's a Nietzschean reference.
Yes, it is.
Kind of a little play on that, but
yes.
I noticed that you obviously no longer active Latter-day Saint, but someone who's isn't some hostile mudslinging person. Though definitely you have your critiques of the church, it's fine. But anyway, it was I just appreciated that was sort of your mentality, and it was this is the kind of person that if you want to have a conversation with, you could do it. And so bringing you on today, one of the things that you had mentioned that you wanted to talk about was sort of bridging these gaps between people who leave and those who stay. There's a lot of familial conflict that exists. I'm someone who's in a family where I'm the only active member besides my parents. Out of my 8 siblings, there's 8 of us all together. And so I've been involved in these dynamics. I know a lot of people who are listening probably are. And so I wanted to have this conversation. So take it away.
Yeah. So, well, you're the perfect person to talk to this about. Hey, really quick, Hayden, what's your family situation like as far as siblings? How many you have? How many are still active? Were you all raised active? All of those questions.
Yeah, it's same as Jacob. I am the only active child. My parents are very active. I have just 2 older brothers, smaller family compared to Jacob's, but we were all born and raised in the church. My brothers started having issues with the church and other things in life in their teenage years, probably starting age is, young as 14, 15, 16 years old. And by 18, they were both long gone. My brother, my oldest brother is officially not a member of the church. He has records removed and claims atheism. But we have a really good relationship, and, we don't really talk religion or theism or atheism. And then my middle brother is technically still a member, if I understand it correctly, but he's not involved in the church in any way. So my parents are very active, though, and I'm obviously.
Okay, yeah. So, all 3 of us have definitely been on one of the sides of that conversation where sometimes it feels like tensions can get really high and things can start to get personal. I think the first thing that I would say is a really important starting point when you're thinking about having this conversation with a person who you seriously care about is, what are your intentions going into the conversation? And if your intentions are to just argue bullet points, like that's legitimately what you're hoping to accomplish, is to prove to them that it's true, even if they don't want to believe it or simply don't find it believable anymore, then you should really question that motive and maybe just push that conversation off for a little bit. Like maybe give yourself a month of breathing room. And this, I'm speaking to your audience the same way that I would speak to my audience. I actually already kind of had this discussion on my channel trying to talk to ex-Mormons, because we do it too. Obviously, I'm not trying to single out one side, but I think question your motives. Are you trying to understand where the person's coming from? Are you trying to empathize with them? Or are you trying to essentially make your case for Mormonism? That can be fun, but it's probably not the first conversation that you want to have. And so that would be my point number 1. My second point, and then I want to hear your feedback, is ask the person, are you ready to have this conversation? And I'm actually specifically talking to your audience right now, because as the person who left, a lot of times I don't know what I should bring up. I don't know if my active counterparts want me to bring anything up. And I don't want to be the person who wasn't asked to drop what I consider to be like a knowledge or a truth bomb on somebody if they don't want that. Like if they haven't told me, I want to know why you left. And so you, as the active person in this conversation, you can approach your loved ones and say, I've noticed that you're not going anymore. I'm willing to have a conversation with you just to understand where you're coming from. I'm not going to try and convince you that you're doing the wrong thing. And I think that really opens up, like, the person who you care about, the person in your family who's left, is going to feel so much more comfortable coming and talking to you, because they're not going to have to feel like they need to explain themselves to you. They can just kind of work, because maybe they haven't totally figured it out. You know, there are a lot of things that we do sometimes that just kind of bubble up out of us, and suddenly we're acting, and then we're narrating to ourselves later why we're acting in the way that we are. And sometimes it's nice to just have somebody who's willing to be empathetic and to love us first and foremost, and then help us figure those things out with no judgment. So yeah, I mean, you guys have both been on the opposite side of this conversation that I have. What would you say about all of that?
So just kind of off the top of my head, I mean, I agree 100%. One of the things is, and it's really funny because people who know me as kind of like, you know, throwing hand grenades and stuff and sort of, like, let's have a debate and all that. But I want everyone who listens to my channel to understand something. There's a difference between private ministry and public advocacy. Okay. And I've had to learn this the hard way, even in my own family and some of the interactions that we have, because there's this desire to go in and like, hey, you know, they just don't understand it. Right. And maybe they don't. Like, maybe you're right. Right. Maybe you're wrong. Maybe you're right. Either way, it doesn't matter. What matters is you have to go back to sort of that elephant and the rider analogy of that people talk a lot about. If you haven't heard about this, guys, go look it up. Jonathan Haidt has an analogy of the elephant and the rider. And the rider is kind of our rational side of us. But that isn't what actually controls us primarily. We're not primarily rational creatures. We're primarily sort of emotional creatures, or creatures that are driven by deeper intuitions that sometimes we can't even fully articulate. And for us in the church, it's sort of like, you know, that's sort of our thing, is like, you're moved by the spirit that's within you and the spirit that influences you. And there's sort of a spiritual thing going on there. And if you want to, I'm not saying that there isn't a place for rational discussion, but it's almost like that's a second phase of the conversation. First, you have to develop a connection with that person to where they actually care about what you say. And a lot of times that just comes from listening. Just let them talk and don't try and solve it. Because once a person feels heard and feel that they're fully understood, at that point is when a person begins to open up and be willing to listen. But if you're just trying to cram stuff down somebody's throat and like show them why they're wrong and convince them, it's not a very effective methodology in private ministry. In public advocacy, I'm not hearing the idea, in the world of ideas, I'm dealing with people that I don't even know. And it's like, I'm not ministering to you. We're having a conversation about what's true in a public forum to try and parse things out. But that's not the tactic of personal interaction with another human being.
Yeah, what I like about what you just said, but sorry to cut you off, Hayden.
No.
You could have been talking to the active member or the inactive member with everything that you just said right there. Like, it applies so much to people on both sides. Ex-Mormons, I'm talking to you right now. They don't want to hear your reasons right away. They really don't. And they're not going to believe you if they feel like you're not listening to them. So it all just goes both ways.
I was just going to say, we're talking about people skills here, and interpersonal relationships is what we're talking about. This is not even a religious, isolated issue. It does remind me though. So I teach about 140, 150 students every given year, and I teach about 5 classes every year. And whenever I teach, there always tends to be, on average, 1 or 2 students per class of 30 or so that really do not want to be involved with the class, really do not want to be involved with the church, really have, and most of them are fairly respectful, and you have some fairly disrespectful ones as well. But if there's anything I've learned over the last few years of teaching these kids, especially in a gospel setting, who don't want to be there, it's that and it even goes back to another Holland quote. Basically says, if you can't teach them today, you can love them today and teach them tomorrow. Like, don't be so hung up on this is the gospel you have to learn. I'm thinking from a teacher standpoint, you're going to learn this or else, or we're going to kick you out of our class if you're not willing to engage. You really can't take that approach. And I think the principle is the same. You have to gain a personal relationship of trust with that individual. And I've seen that with my students, and I've seen them open up, and I've seen some not. I've seen some not wanted to engage, but other ones, in my early years of teaching, and I'm still pretty early on in my teaching years, but in the first couple of years, there was a lot of judgment happening in my mind that I was not even trying to get to know these students who you could tell were struggling. I was more hard on them than anything, and it was the wrong way to go about it. But as you just love and listen and ask about them, and even totally non-gospel related things, tell me about your life. Like, it's a relationship issue is what we're dealing with, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody who, there's the famous quarrel between, like, we've all heard stories of the husband and wife, and the argument is that the husband just wants to solve the problems and the wife just wants to be heard. And it's that again, Jacob, you brought up Height's elephant. It reminds me of, without getting too into Nietzsche here, but it reminds me of like the fundamental disagreement between Nietzsche and Jung, which was essentially that, Nietzsche said that God was dead, and now we have to become the Ubermensch. Now we have to create our own values. And Jung's whole idea was, you can't create your values. You're on an elephant. You can't control it. You're just narrating it. And so, and there's a lot of humility. I don't know that I would say, obviously I don't think it's the spirit that's guiding me anymore, but I think that there are, I just simplify it to, there's my experiencing self and there's my narrating self. And my narrating self is trying as hard as he can to keep up, but there's humility in realizing that you're not steering anything and you just kind of have to let go. So, my next point was, I kind of wanted to bring up not a dichotomy, because there are more reasons, but
we lost him.
Let's
keep chatting. Let's keep chatting.
We'll soldier on. So I have 2 points. One, going along with those kind of people skills, in the middle of the conversation, if you can feel your heart rate elevating, if you can feel yourself starting to get defensive, then the best course of action at that point would be to say, hey, I need to take a timeout for a second. I'm going to go walk around, and let's continue this conversation in 5 minutes. And timeouts are huge. You should, whether you are having a conversation about why your family member is leaving the church, or whether you're talking to your wife about something, or a close friend, whatever it is, timeouts are huge. And just having that awareness within you that, like, you don't have to be an expert on this stuff. When your heart starts to get a little bit out of control, when your tongue starts to go dry, right? These are fight or flight. This is evidence of fight or flight. I don't know if you know this, but your tongue, so this is where I will nerd out for one moment. Your tongue goes dry because digestion is no longer important to your body, because your body is concerned about survival. And so why would you digest? Why would you spend time putting saliva on food if you could be killed by a lion in 5 minutes? So your body cuts down on all the unnecessary things. This is why ulcers, now I'm getting way off track, but this is why ulcers happen, because the digestion in your stomach, they're caused by stress. It's stopping and starting and stopping and starting so many times. And so if you can start to get a sense for when your body is at peace, and especially if you can have that awareness in the middle of a conversation to say, I need to take some deep breaths, my feet are on the floor and still not able to control it, I'm just going to tell the person that I'm talking to that I need a quick timeout, is huge. It's absolutely huge.
So tell me this. Let's apply this to our relationship. When I first met you, and we've only talked a couple of times, we sent a couple of text messages back and forth, but I feel like, even you don't live in Arizona, do you? Where do you live at?
No, I'm in Utah.
Okay, so we couldn't really meet up necessarily, but the impression I immediately got when I was seeing you and Tracy is that, hey, I could be friends with this guy.
Yeah.
And all of our conversations have been like very like enjoyable. So I'm curious to your opinion on how is that possible when you and I are coming from adamantly, and we haven't necessarily dug into, you know, your qualms with the church or, you know, church history. And we could, but I feel like even if we did, it would be as friendly as it has been. And I'm using us as an example because that's kind of what we're talking about. How do we have hard conversations with people we adamantly disagree with? Oh, here he is. Hello.
There he is.
He's back.
Okay, should we just hey, and you sound good too.
I do sound good. Okay, I'm on my regular thing
Setup
now.
Yeah.
It's still the time's still running. It's at 20 minutes and 25 seconds almost.
Yeah, that's fine. We can I can jump back in there. I'm sorry, guys.
You're good.
I have never had a thing like this. Like, Hayden, our things usually go pretty smooth. Like,
oh yeah.
This is ridiculous. I'm sorry, man. I feel bad.
No, don't feel bad. I mean, I probably just said the best thing I've ever said in my life.
And it wasn't.
No, I'm just kidding.
Well, it's okay. It's been recording. We're good. We're good.
No, just
hey,
kidding.
Everyone. I'm just gonna cut back into it real quick. Hey, everybody, we're back. We had some technical difficulties there, but we are back, and I actually am back on my normal camera and stuff. So we're gonna see if this works.
So tell us, where do you want me and Cody continue the conversation while you were out? Do you want us to redo that part? We can.
No,
only for a minute or two.
Continue. I will listen.
Okay, we will continue.
Okay, go ahead. How would you like? How is this possible? Or what's Cody been your experience as you and I have been chatting? What was your first impression of me, and you know what was your feeling? Because it didn't seem like you had a fight or flight reaction to me. I hope I didn't. You know.
Well, that's because I'm good at breathing.
That's right.
I am. See, I'm like the Hulk. My secret is that I'm always in fight or flight.
There you go. We don't know the difference.
Exactly. No. So I think that kind of comes down to two parts. I have this superpower. No, not really. I didn't get that sense from you that you were going to come on and attack me. Well, actually, that's not true. When I finally understood what you said about the echo chamber thing, I was like, who is this guy? You know,
and can I ask you one more question real quick?
Yeah.
If you had to guess when an ex-member, let me get my hands up here. When an ex-member, former member, and an active member of the church have a conversation, let's say online, like you and I were there.
Yeah.
How often would you say it's the active member going after the former member and vice versa? Like, can you put do you see that very often?
It depends on whose show it is, I think. I think when you're the leader of the show, I feel like there's this idea in YouTube culture that like you're the expert and you're just going to smush whoever comes on and you're going to berate them and you're going to mute them if you have to and all that. And I come into it assuming that I'm probably as intelligent as whoever I'm talking to. And so I don't feel the need, or I don't even think that I really have the ability to smush somebody. And the other part of that is I have this general sense that anybody who is willing to say, send me a link, I'm going to put my face or my voice actually with you right now, probably has thought about it. I'm willing to say you've thought about it more than me because you're willing to hop onto a channel that you're unfamiliar with because you didn't know who I was. And so when you came with the echo chamber comment and I finally understood what it meant, I thought this is a troll. I will send him the link. I will call his bluff. Nobody will talk to me. That's what I thought would happen.
Watch out. That's Hayden's game, man. Then he comes on, he's really nice.
Yeah.
He'll be like, well, I can combative and be like, hey guys, I'm actually really nice. Let's talk.
Yeah. And then I instantly got this sense from the way that you said hi, from the way that we quickly exchanged pleasantries, that this wasn't somebody who was gonna try and smush me, you know. And so at that point, it's just that. And there's another part of it too, which is essentially, like, we could do the whole rigmarole. We could talk about why I left the church. Like, I'm not super interested in that debate, because you mean
we could have the same conversation on every single episode of the Mormon Stories
yes
podcast?
Yes, we could. Well,
episode 7,000 of the exact same story.
Yes, we could do that. I'll do it in 3 seconds. I felt like it stopped working. I felt like I wasn't happy anymore. It wasn't bringing me where I wanted to be, and so I did an experiment. I left it for a while, and I felt the happiness stay the same or come back. I felt no measurable change, and so I thought, I kind of like this, actually. I kind of like not being a part of it, and I haven't felt guilty anymore. I feel like my life is actually improving as I'm leaving that place. And so the right decision for me was to leave. And so if my ultimate bottom of the barrel reason is I tried leaving and I felt like it made my life better, that doesn't mean that I can prescribe anything for anybody. And I don't think that anybody can prescribe something different for me. And so I feel very calm in that place. And so I assume that somebody else's intentions are similar, that they think that the church is the best place for them to be. And so why would I take something that they think they need away from them? Like, it's like,
I think that probably is at the root of what makes you different from many ex-Mormons, because you kind of say, I've found something that works for me. Maybe this is working for them, where they tend to take a more, what I call almost like a new religious approach. Now, I will be very honest that I believe that everyone hopefully will come to Christ and make covenants and be part of the church and all that kind of stuff. Fine, fair enough. But when someone leaves, they can do more like what you did, where you say, I found something that works for me, that works for, maybe this works for you. But then there are others who say, no, right, this new way that I found, this is the way to go. And I need to therefore essentially preach my new worldview and religion, as it were, onto these superstitious lost souls.
Yes.
And I need to begin evangelization.
Yeah, I don't remember. It was in one of my videos that I said this. Essentially, this is a critique that I have, and this is a problem that I have with what the ex-Mormon movement generally has become. I don't think it started like this, but I think it is this way now. Tree of life scenario, okay? When I was active, I thought I was standing under the tree, eating the fruit, and I was being scorned at by the people in the great and spacious building. Now, and not now, but I left, and for a brief period, I thought, oh, now I'm standing under the tree. Now I'm eating the fruit. And now those Mormons over there are standing in that great and spacious building, and they're scorning at me. And then I did a little more thinking. I sat with that for a while, and I said, I don't think there's a tree. I don't think there is a building. There is no spoon, Neo. That's what it all came down to. And suddenly it was like, so it's all just medicine. This person has found something that they think is adding to their life. And so I shouldn't take their medicine away from them. And I think that I found something that makes my life better. And so please don't take that from me. And it just ends there.
That's, I how do I want to say this? I think that works. And I don't mean to get into any, we don't have to argue necessarily.
We can.
But I think, part of me is like, yes. And the one issue I see with that is that, do we care about truth, right? You're going to find a lot of religious people saying that I'm part of this religion because it's true, not because it makes my life better. Some people might even say it's harder to be a member of the LDS church, but I don't care. I'm here because it's true. So help me understand it. It seems like, and I don't want to put words in your mouth at all, so correct me. Seems like you're saying it doesn't really matter what's true. It just matters what works for you. Is that accurate or no?
Well, so I kind of did a slippery, I went down a scale in my process, because it was actually from a lot of the episodes of Mormon stories that I've watched, from a lot of the friends that I've talked to, my transition took a lot longer than a lot of the ones that I've heard about, where it was like very, very first month, end of the year in 2017 is where I started to think this might not be true. And it was the end of 2020, probably 2021, 2020, somewhere in there, that I said, this isn't good. I want to be totally out.
So wait, the church is not good. Is that, or not working? Not good for you, or not good for everyone?
Not good for me. Not good for me. Actually, it was probably that I went, it's not good, period. And then it was probably like another year. It was probably early last year that I realized I don't actually know what's good for everybody. I only know what's good for me. It wasn't good for me. So I went from the church is all good and all true to the church is mostly true, but still all good, to the church is mostly untrue, but all good. And it just slowly went down like that until I just thought, it doesn't work for me. And then I can't prescribe for other people.
Can you give us some examples, and not to reveal anything too personal, but what didn't work for you? What was the bad part for you anyway?
Yeah. So let's see. How much do I want to share? Your fans are nice, right?
I think they are. I think they're understanding. Hopefully,
yeah, actually, I've been surprised to see the mixed amount of people on my channel. I have, faithful Latter-day Saints are kind of the typical people, but you'd be surprised. There's a lot, and frankly, I think it's good for them to hear your perspective.
No, I trust you. I was mostly kidding with that comment, but
and I'm not asking to argue. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. I just want to know.
No. So what happened was I was definitely raised in one of those very strict McConkey-like families, which I think sets you up for failure. I think there's probably, I don't have any data on this, but I think that there's a higher proportion of people raised with the McConkey-like belief where you don't get a second chance after you die. You it's a very much more strict way of living than like what Hinckley did in the 90s. And I was raised by a mother who she was the only member from her family. And so it was like, I'm getting my celestial family. I'm not, because I don't have another one. I only have the one that I create. And so it was very strict. And I remember at one point, every summer was like church vacation. We would go to the Sacred Grove. We would go to Nauvoo. One time we did a road trip from Palmyra to Nauvoo, and that was way too much time in the car. But like, this was my life growing up. And I remember when we were in Sharon, Vermont, which is the birthplace of Joseph Smith, the elderly missionaries that were at the center had us sit around in a circle and hold hands and commit to one another that we would be there in the celestial kingdom. And I was probably 11, 12, 13, somewhere in there at this point. And when things, jumping forward a little bit, when things started to maybe go a little bit sideways and I started to be more open about, I don't know if this is working for me, those experiences started to be weaponized against me. Like, but you said that you would be there. And I was like, I was 12. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
sure.
I don't know if I was prepared to make that decision or whatever. And so anyway, so I served a mission. I was in Peru. I actually really liked my mission. I don't know, knowing everything I know now, that I would do it again, but there's like a 40% chance that I would. So I don't regret all of it because good things still came from it. But I got home. I started, I reconnected with the person who is my wife. We dated in high school, and she had tried and failed to become an active member and just couldn't do it. Didn't feel any of the goodness that she was supposed to feel. It would always come in spurts and then go away. And we ended up breaking up before, like kind of in the middle of my mission, because she just said, look, you want a Mormon girl. I can't be that Mormon girl for you. And about a year after getting home, I realized I can either like somehow I was in love and it was not going away. And I was comparing everybody to this person. And I just thought, I can either marry somebody who I don't think I will be in love with, or I can marry this person and I know that I will be in love and I'll have the marriage that I want. And I tried to date every active girl in Provo. Which
I'm so sorry you had that
experience. I tried, and every time it was like, but she's not her, you know? And so it kind of became like a weird version of Pascal's wager, where it was like, I can maybe be with God, although I don't think that the God that I was raised to believe in would really separate my mom from me, because I wanted to marry somebody. Like suddenly all the rules, all the, well, you have to be a worthy temple member, well, you have to take the sacrament, well, you have to, all of these rules suddenly felt like overbearing. And it suddenly felt like, wait a second, doesn't God just care about if I'm a good person? Doesn't he just want me to like love people? Because that was the ultimate lesson that I took from my mission, was if you just really love people, you leave an impact on their life that changes them, whether they get baptized or not. And so I thought, doesn't God care more about that than if I check all the boxes? Like, won't he be okay with this? And so I essentially, I rolled the dice, you know, I bet. And what I always tell people is, I don't know for a fact, I don't know 100% that Mormonism is not true. I just know that I am willing to bet my eternity on it. And I'm willing to bet everything that I have right now, that I love right now. I have an almost 2-year-old. I have a wife. We have an awesome life. We want more kids. Everything that I have now, I'm willing to bet it on that Joseph Smith wasn't quite who he said that he was. Not that he was purposefully misleading people, just that maybe he was wrong. That's the extent of the argument.
Well, and you know, as I was in that story, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on it, but
yeah,
to you know, I look at it and I say, I have noticed the same pattern. A lot of times the people who, I always say that I kind of see two problems, right? And I use a tree as an analogy.
Yeah.
If your tree is too rigid, the first time the wind blows, it will snap.
Yeah.
Okay. That's kind of the overly legalistic. I think I actually think it's not Mormonism properly understood, in my opinion. And that's a whole conversation I can have with people. But then on the other hand, you have where your tree is so flexible, it's not even a tree anymore. It's just like whatever you want it to be, that's what it is. It's like you really have some vague spiritualism that you believe in, but you call it Mormonism. And it's like, that ain't us. You know what I mean? So I do believe that there needs to be a balance, and that's more kind of to my audience. But as far as the relationships go, because these sorts of things that we're talking about right now, digging into all of this, if you want to listen to someone and let them talk and let them vent, it will be a very good thing for the relationship. My belief is that, and I think any of us who've been missionaries, we all know this, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah.
It's a truism. And that is the work of ministry with individuals. Now, I don't want to say this from the position of that you're going in and be like, all right, I got this like tactic I'm going to use. I'm going to be like really nice to him. And then I'll be able to get
and then I'll get him. Yeah,
exactly. It doesn't work like that, because relationships have to be genuine.
Right.
You have to, like, in, you know, from a Latter-day Saint perspective, Christ talks about love unfeigned. People don't understand what that means. Unfeigned, to feint something. If you're boxing, to feint is to fake something. It's to use it as a tactic to get something for you, rather than valuing the relationship just in and of itself. My take with my family members who have left is this, and I believe this is a fully gospel-centered Latter-day Saint Christian perspective that you should have based on what's taught. And that is what eternity is made of, and what really matters ultimately are relationships. It's the whole purpose of our religion. It's about relationships with God and relationships with other people. and maximizing those relationships to the greatest extent that you can. Now, I'm a believer that in order to maximize a relationship with a particular person, we have to have particular values that coincide, because I can't have the same kind of relationship with someone who has very, very different values. We can still have a good relationship, but there's going to be a cap on it. That's why most of my friends are Latter-day Saints. That's why, because we're operating on the same wavelength. That's why a lot of ex-mos, they all kind of become friends, because it's like, oh, we're all kind of on the same wavelength. So there's this idea of syncing up with people who share your values. And so that's why I believe that ultimately, if people are unified in Jesus Christ, they're able to have the highest level of relationship that they can have. But what about those who don't accept Jesus Christ and are not striving for the same goals that you are and fundamentally have differences, like many of my siblings? I say, okay, I'm going to maximize that relationship as far as I can maximize it. I'm going to make it as good as I possibly can. And like, for instance, with my brother Forrest and I, we both disagree on a whole lot of things, and we discuss it and debate it and do that kind of stuff. But the thing is that Forrest and I are able to do that and not let it affect our relationship. I have other siblings I can't really do that with. And so I don't. Forrest and I actually, our relationship gets in some ways better because we both appreciate the conversations that we're able to have. And that's the only reason I have them with him. So I have to recognize with anyone who leaves the church in my family or anyone that I know, I say, look, my job is to maximize the relationship that I have with them. And that is an end in and of itself. If that does have the side effect of somehow drawing them closer to Christ, wonderful. But that's not necessarily like, you can't fake it. You have to just genuinely appreciate the relationship and then allow God to work with them however he's going to work. And that's the approach that I think that Latter-day Saints need to take, instead of going on these, well, I'm going to go in there and just smack them down with what I see as the truth and my arguments and my testimony and everything else. It's like, you ain't there. Like, bear your testimony when they want your testimony.
Yeah. I mean, how many years of humans are social creatures, right? And how long have we evolved in social hierarchies? Like, we can sniff out somebody trying to manipulate us. We can sniff out somebody who's not being genuine. I have a thought. You made me have a thought, and I want to throw this at you, and I want to see what you think about it. Is there a case to be made that philosophy, religion, I know it's probably way too meta to talk about this here because we're talking about the conversation that we're having now, but is there a case to be made that these things are the spice, they're the spice of life, and they should be thought of in those terms? If you see yourself having a cap on certain relationships, it's because you are trying to eat a plate full of salt and pepper instead of using it to season your food. Does that make sense?
So you're saying like that
because you put so much value on sharing the beliefs with them that the human connection can be stopped. Because they don't even see what you're focusing on as something as important as you see it. Right. So it's almost like the meta value conversation.
And I would say but that is, I think, the problem. The problem is that you have to remember that ultimately this is all about relationships anyway.
Right.
So like, if you're destroying the relationship, it's like you're messing it up. Like, at least maybe you can't have a celestial relationship, but you could probably have a T-rest relationship instead of a T-lestial relationship, right? You get to level 2 and maybe not level 3, but like, I see people that are like, they destroy their relationships. It's like, it's either a celestial relationship or it's none.
Right.
And in my mind, it's like, no, wrong answer.
Yeah. They're chewing on rocks.
It's exactly. It's like, but when you recognize that this ultimately is all about the maximization of relationships. Well, remember, just because something broke in a relationship, it doesn't mean that everything is broken in the relationship.
Right.
And you should grab onto those pieces of the relationship that still exist and hold on to them tighter than you ever have, because you're in danger of losing those as well.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, that is like, that's what life and salvation and everything is about. Like, is how much, like, the riches of heaven, in my mind, like, how rich am I really? I lived in a country, or I was in Argentina is where I served. I was with people who had nothing, but honestly, they were richer than some of the wealthiest people that I know. And I think all of us who have been in those situations know what I'm talking about. And it's because what they had were relationships.
Cody, would you agree with him? I would guess that your purpose in life has changed since leaving the church, right? You're not necessarily looking towards that eternal life, idea or doctrine that you once held to. I don't know if you would say you have a purpose in this life, but would you agree that it's all about relationships? Or if so, how did you come to that conclusion?
Well, so one of the things that I realized as this, I don't want it to sound like I saw Mormonism as a problem and that I just had to detach myself from it, because I desperately tried to hold on and make things work and stay in the boat. And so when the idea of eternity, when the comforting idea of eternity was ripped from my brain, I started to find comfort. I started to think that maybe I had been thinking about eternity backwards. And the reason that's all very like ethereal, but I'll try and bring it back to earth. I think that if time goes on forever, the value of time goes down. I think that scarcity is required to make things valuable. And so I focus on relationships. I talked about this. I have a video called How Noah Built His Ark, where I talk about this idea because so a couple years ago, my grandma died in the middle of a fight that she was having with my dad. And it was never resolved, obviously. And I realized in that moment, this was right at the end of my faith crisis journey thing. I realized in that moment that you have no idea how long people are going to be around you. And if I live my whole life expecting problems to be solved by perfect judgment in the afterlife, and the afterlife isn't there, then I live my life not solving problems that I could have solved. And so suddenly eternity to me seemed to motivate complacency. And I know that other people will see it differently, and I don't have a problem with that. But valuing the very short amount of time that I have with the people who are around me is my most important ought, if you will. I mean, Hayden, I know that Jacob, you said that you have a few kids. Hayden, do you have kids?
Yeah, 1 3-year-old.
Yeah, so you watch them grow up so fast and they leave these stages and you're just like, what? You were just barely like, you see how fast their hair grows. You see like how tall they're getting, how chubby their belly is getting. And you're just like, you were just this little thing, And another thing, I guess, having kids has made me just look at people differently. I see people and I imagine them as a 5-year-old and I'm like, you've gotten so big, like, but time is so short. We have so little of it. The earth has been around for billions of years and we have so little time. And so, the result of thinking that way has made me value time more. Even though I know a lot of people have this idea that if you're an atheist, how can there be a meaning of life? You just end. And it's like, yes, because we end, there is a meaning.
So
the end. Yeah.
Let me give a little bit of thoughts on that. Because first of all, I totally acknowledge what you're saying in the sense that, and I do believe that there is a problem with people who because of their view of the afterlife think, okay, well then I guess this life doesn't really matter that much. Now I think that is a bad.
Bad conclusion.
That's a bad conclusion from the perspective of LDS theology. If you read something like, what it says in Alma about, this is the day, and it's like the spirit that inhabits you now, what you're like now, you're kind of like, I always use the analogy of like drying cement. You know what I mean? It's like you're becoming more and more fixed in who you are as time goes on. Now, so I think I can agree with what you're saying there. And I think that there is a problem when people kind of think, oh, we can resolve things later. And it's just that constant thing. Now, on the other hand, personally, I have a very, very hard time with, you can create your own meaning in life in the sense that you have your own goals and your own desires and your own preferences and things like that. But when people like Hayden or others, and Hayden, correct me if I'm wrong, are talking about meaning, it's finding any bigger meaning than just, I'm an animal, I've evolved this way, I'm ultimately controlled, not even, I am a chemical reaction playing itself out on some random place in the cosmos. I'll play myself out, I'll die, and that's the whole thing. And so I don't think, like, I've pondered a lot about that. And one of the issues that I have with it is that I'm a believer that even if I didn't believe in my faith or in the church, I would believe that we live in a fundamentally fallen world. It's unfair. It's full of suffering. Like, everyone I love could die tomorrow. By random chance, I live in a time when it's actually fairly decent to live, unlike most of human history. And I look around and I go, on a macro level, it's kind of like, I use this analogy. If the train to Auschwitz, if I'm on a car that's actually serving good food and we're all kind of enjoying ourselves, it's like, okay, cool. Yay for me. But I'm still on the train to Auschwitz. This isn't worth it. This is actually horrible. And in fact, the fact that I'm on the train to Auschwitz enjoying good food while everyone else in history has suffered and there's all sorts of injustice, it's like I become extremely nihilistic because I believe that the world without redemption is merely a world of a fall. And I just don't know how. I guess my thing is I have a hard time finding other philosophies out there outside of theism that provide a solution to that problem, because I think you can't escape the fall. And so the only hope is in redemption.
So I hear what you're saying. Do you have a favorite? This is going to seem like a weird left turn, but do you have like a favorite song or a favorite music artist that you like to listen to?
I love Weezer.
Okay. So like what's a Weezer song that you'll just put on and enjoy?
Oh, of course. The first one ever. My Name is Jonas, man.
Okay. Yes.
Rivers Cuomo has been killing it since 1990. He's still killing it. Like, this guy is a legend. I'm sorry.
So quick sidetrack, because you brought up Weezer. He did an interview with Pete Holmes on Pete Holmes' podcast, and it's awesome. You should listen to it. It's called You Made It Weird, and all of his episodes get great. But sorry, I didn't mean to sidetrack.
No,
you love My Name is Jonas. You play the song. What's the point, man? It's just going to end. So what's the point of the song?
That's and that is, it's sort of like, again, on the micro level, I totally get what you're saying.
Right.
I'm in the train to Auschwitz. I had a good cheeseburger.
Right.
Man, that was pretty nice. It's like, the train is going to Auschwitz and most people are going to suffer, but you had that burger.
Right. No, so I think the issue that, and this is nitpicking the analogy, so I don't mean to do that, but what, and I know that there are bad things going on in the world, but are we really on the train to Auschwitz? Like,
so are we? Yes. I think when you look at the totality of suffering in the world, and I don't mean just suffering. What I really mean is the perverse injustice of life. And I don't mean just human life. I mean life. Do you know how many animals die of starvation and disease in the wild every single day?
Right.
Like a
Right.
death that you would shudder to, all the little, like my dad, for instance, we're involved in wildlife stuff. And he studied some of the biological systems in the state of Nevada. And he was finding out about the number of like bobcat kittens that are born to a female each year. And what's funny is like each female has like, I don't know, it's like something like 4 or 5 kittens in each litter every couple years or whatever. But the population never really grows that much. The population should explode by like 5,
Right.
6 times, but it doesn't. And what that means is that literally those kittens and enormous numbers of those animals starve to death or suffer immensely until they die. And when you reduce human beings to just another part of the animal kingdom, like, okay, well, why do you care about human suffering, but not all this other suffering? This thing becomes so perverse. It honestly is one of the reasons that people lose faith in God, because they look at how awful it is and they say, nope, that ain't no loving God. And so I actually agree with the atheists who point that out, who say there is no good, there is no evil, there is just, this is Richard Dawkins' famous quote, there is just blind, pitiless indifference. And I go, oh.
Yeah.
And then I feel guilty because I'm the one who's enjoying the cheeseburger on the train to Auschwitz.
Right.
Listening to My Name is Jonas.
Right.
So
you're having a wonderful time on this train.
Yeah.
No, I hear you. I hear you.
And so in my mind, that's, but see, that's to me why Christianity specifically speaks so loudly. Because what Christianity's message is this idea of redemption. It doesn't ignore the fall. It doesn't ignore the nature of the world. It says there's hope. And I think that's that's why when I do kind of comparative theology, why the Christian message resonates so much, not just with my cultural background, but with what I see in reality as the nature of this world, which, like, Christianity, well, C.S. Lewis famously said that Christianity doesn't start in a place of comfort. It ends in a place of comfort, but it actually begins in a place of discomfort as we recognize the nature of reality. And again, I think there are, absurdism and other sorts of philosophies that try and deal with it. I just, I have a hard time getting around that. And I had a whole episode on this with the Midnight Mormons where I said, look, if I didn't believe in God, I'd be like, let's stop the train. Like, if we can find a way to bring the train slowly to a stop in a way that hurts less people, like, that's good. Like, let's go for zero population or something and just end it. And it's people are like, oh my gosh, it's so dark, but it's like, why keep the train rolling?
So what do you, Cody?
So some people can enjoy Weezer and a cheeseburger on one of the cars.
Yeah.
So Cody, what do you think? Because it sounds like there's a disagreement of purpose here. What are you thinking?
Well, so there were, I mean, there was a lot there, but there were 2 separate things that I want to address. The first one is, this all got brought up because we were talking about meaning. And you said, yeah, meaning is nice, but there's a higher meaning, if I'm understanding you correctly, that there needs to be a meaning outside of what's just going on inside of our brains.
Yeah. Well, I would say, I would frame it as there's sort of macro meaning, like you inside the car eating the cheeseburger and listening to Weezer. And then but that is only one level of analysis that I think we take, because we also have to ask the question, not is our life worth it, but is life worth it?
Right.
And to some extent, that's a big paradigm change. When you start to say, yeah, I am enjoying this, but there is no bigger cause than me.
Right. So in a sense that we're now talking about things that can't be falsified, because we can't go out into the world and pick up this thing called meaning that is outside of ourselves. We can't talk to I assume, do you think that the meaning in our life comes from God? Where do you think that this higher meaning that you're talking about comes from?
I always struggle a little bit with what people mean by meaning, right?
Right.
In my mind, how do I best
So
describe
in
it?
the let me reframe my question and
Yeah, go ahead.
and see if this helps. So you're talking about, is life valuable? Is there meaning to life itself? Not is there meaning to my life? Is there meaning to life itself?
Yeah.
Right? Does and first of all, I think
Okay, I'll put it this way.
meaning
Here's
is
the
a
best way to put it.
neutral term.
Does it have a relationship to an end or purpose? Because
Okay.
the meaning of a text has meaning if it's connected to something else, right? So is life itself connected to anything, any sort of a telos, any sort of a purpose? Because if it isn't, then it's just arbitrary happenstance. And it's also an arbitrary happenstance that happens to really suck.
Yeah. And so it seems like the way that this argument, like this train of thought, ironically now a train of thought, nice. The way that this has to go is, if something's going to have a telos, then it has to have a person who something that gave it that telos. Things don't do.
Yes.
And that thing would have to be God, right? So the argument backs up all the way to, there has to be a God that gave purpose to life.
I would kind of argue that, at least from an LDS theological standpoint, we wouldn't say that. We would say, I would venture to say that there was purpose before God became God.
Yeah.
So it's baked into reality rather than.
That's a good point, Hayden. And I think you and I have talked about this before, that well-being in and of itself is baked into reality. And as an intelligence or a sentient creature, or whatever we want to say, kind of the thing that experiences well-being or suffering, that is baked into reality itself. And so everything that we do, in my opinion, is ultimately geared towards that end. You can't escape it. It's just baked into reality. God himself, he has a purpose that he's bound by, which we would call eternal law, or we would call the nature of reality itself. And that with, like, literally baked into the nature of being is the desire for well-being, is the best way to sort of lay that out. Gets a little less
like reality exists without God, and reality does not exist without that idea. Is that fair to say?
That's
like
that's kind of the way I would frame it.
Okay.
Like, that is reality.
So,
and this is very much just so you know, from an atheistic perspective, like Sam Harris, this is, I actually, much of this notion is developed by me reading and understanding what he's saying, where he's saying there is sort of a telos to some, he might not say it that way, but that we have an inherent desire to move away from suffering and towards well-being. And I think he's absolutely right. I think all the differences is that his conception of being itself is that it's a very short temporary thing, where my thing is no, this is it's an eternal thing. And so the scope under which I'm examining this, or the scope under which purpose is going to play out, is an eternal one. And so I need to get on a path that leads to eternal well-being at the highest potential, which we call eternal life.
Yeah. So I totally see where you're coming from here, and I don't necessarily disagree with it. I think well-being it has to be one of the rules that is, I mean, though I was explaining this literally, you probably were on this part of my live stream that we were talking about this. There are facts about the human body that tell us what we should feed the human body, right?
Sure.
Like, and that is geared, that is framed through well-being. If I eat rocks, if I eat bricks, there are rules about the way that my body is constructed where that won't work anymore, right?
Yep.
Or I use the chess analogy, where, like, you can tell a computer what the rules of chess are, and the computer will figure out the best strategy to optimize the game of chess. And then the computer will beat you at chess every time. And you never told it, you never sent the cookie crumbs down the, you didn't tell it what to do. You just told it what the rules are and it figured it all out. But my whole question to that higher meaning, lower meaning, macro meaning, however we want to differentiate between those two things, is if a person, because we are people who are going to experience this subjectively. And so if a person looks at that higher meaning that might be there, might not be there, there could be people who simply don't find that to be the most practical way to live and base their life. And so the rubber hits the road as soon as people get involved. And I know that you would probably think that is evidence that we're fallen or something along those lines, or maybe you don't. But if it then has to be embodied and it has to be acted by a person, then in my opinion, whatever the most practical version of their meaning is, has to be the correct version of meaning, because these aren't things that we can go out and touch, right? Because they're not quantifiable, because we can't measure them or falsify them. The only thing that we have in front of us is, does this make you go in the correct direction? And of course, we could argue what the correct direction is. Well-being and suffering is a great starting point. But if it has to go through a person who then has to act it, and they can't act it, it's like trying to explain calculus to a 5-year-old. It's like, I'm telling you all of the math. Why are you not getting this? And it's like, well, you have to meet them at their level.
Yeah. So it's you bring up kind of bringing in other people into this. Well, actually, let me go one step back. I actually don't believe that there is any other game except for well-being and suffering. I mean, literally, I think that's when we talk about.
No, I think that's a great game. That's a great game.
It's everything you do is to move away from suffering and towards well-being. Like this conversation, yes. That's the reason that we're doing it, ultimately. And so there's only one purpose for every action. The only question is if every action has the same ultimate purpose, the question is how long does that game play out? Is it 80 years-ish, if you're lucky? Mm-hmm. Or is it eternal? And that makes a big difference in the way that you play that game. Also, another huge factor, you say you bring in other people. It's not subjective per se. I think it's an intersubjective game, because I believe on this broad sort of cosmological picture, you're dealing with everyone being connected, in the sense that I don't believe that I can, because I believe in cosmic justice, I don't believe that I can harm you and actually increase my well-being by harming other people. I think it's like a mathematical impossibility on the cosmic scales of justice. But when you reduce human existence to 80 years and you frame it as we're just animals competing for survival. And, I kind of go, well, wait a minute. If my well-being is mostly increased by me, taking care of my tribe and taking advantage of other tribes, as most humans have done for most of human history, there's no reason why I shouldn't do that on the calculus of just increasing my own well-being for me and my tribe in the 80 years that I'm around, because there is no intersubjectivity. It's purely subjective. What I do is everything is a means to my end. Nothing is an end in and of itself in that limited 80-year window.
Yeah, I guess the question is, are human beings naive enough to not understand that? Because we're playing the longer evolutionary game. We're social creatures. What is best for me is what's going to be best for my tribe, right? And I know that my tribe will live forever. So it doesn't make sense, even from a selfish standpoint, it doesn't make sense to, for example, over-farm, over-hunt, totally take advantage of the earth so that there's nothing that my future posterity, my future tribe can use to survive.
But
so there
but
has
is
to
that
be a
assuming
level.
we can't rebel against our own biology? Because by the standards of biology, I should just be like, contraception should just be the biggest taboo ever,
Right.
because ultimately it goes against that order of maximizing the reproduction of your genes. I don't think, and I mean this in the sense that, because one of the things I look at is I go, is the world as described by materialistic atheism, is that the actual world? Is that model descriptive of the world that I inhabit? And in my mind, it just isn't. Simply I think there are points to be made by it. But one of the things that I find as I look at reality is I say, no, I don't like there's no reason I should care about the future survival of the species. As I just said, using reason alone, I can say I don't even think the species should continue. I think we should just, stop the train.
Right.
And that's totally, first of all, against any sort of evolutionary, I should not have evolved to have those feelings, yet all of my feelings, but you say it's, anyway, that's a separate subject. But my point is just that, as maybe Nietzsche would have pointed out, ultimately it comes down to me. It's what I want. I would, in all reality, I think the logical place to go is to become a supremacist. If you are going down the route of atheistic sort of nihilism, you pick the tribe that you think is the most important to you to maximize your well-being, and you vie for the supremacy of that group. Now, all people have done when they create universal humanity is all they're doing is they're just saying, my tribe is all human beings. But that's totally arbitrary. Why all human beings?
But every way of dividing us up would be arbitrary.
Yes. Anyway.
Right? So why is one arbitrary way necessarily better or worse than another? If what's
yes,
right?
That's my point. It's all arbitrary power battles, and you saying my tribe is all of humans, and the Nazis saying my tribe is white Aryan people. There's no difference in saying one of those is a right answer and one of those is a wrong answer, if ultimately it's all just arbitrary drawing lines around the tribe that you want to be a part of.
Yeah.
And that was Nietzsche's point.
Right. Well, no, it's interesting because there's nothing underneath either of those things that we could ground that in and say, like, I think evolutionarily speaking, we could say human beings, the Homo sapien, this will be the group. It's the only distinction.
I think you can make all
necessary.
I don't think in evolutionary terms, there's all sorts of variations on Homo sapiens that exist even within racial and family groups. And, these are just genetic patterns is all they boil down to. And any way you draw the lines around the genetic patterns is sort of arbitrary. But what I think Christianity provides, and I would say even other theistic religions that believe in a concept of cosmic justice for human beings says that you are held accountable and you will suffer if you hurt anyone. If you hurt the least among you, if you hurt the slave, if you mistreat your fellow man, you will be hurt for that. And so there is then there is an obligation. You ought not hurt that person if you care about your own well-being. But if there is no ultimate justice, well, heck, if I can take advantage and get away with it, and it benefits me and the tribe that I've arbitrarily decided on.
Sounds like we're getting into morality, right? I think there's a whole other episode to have on that. Maybe we can. I know we talked about going about an hour or so.
Yeah. Sorry, we kind of.
No, you're good.
I've kind of gotten into one of my tangents. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I have one thing that I want to say to that, but my computer is going to do a thing right at 12.
Okay.
And so I either need to take like a 5-minute break, or we need to put a pin in this.
You make the call. What would you like to do?
I will do a quick. Probably should take. I really don't want to end it here because
Yeah, no, it's fine.
It's a good part. I have like 20 things written down. I don't even know if I'm going to say any of them the way that I want to say it.
To really flesh it out, though, I think we should have a part 2 eventually.
We should have a part 2. Yes. Maybe I will give me 5 minutes if that's okay.
Yeah.
And I'll be right back.
Yeah, no problem.
So I have 2 points in regards to this very dark, twisted version of humanity. But actually, I'll make a quick third point. I am happy that somebody like you, who is either going to believe in God and think that he should do all these good things, or not believe in God and think that the logical extreme is that I should go do all these bad things. I love that you believe in God.
Most humanists do.
And I think that there's a personality thing in there, because again, I don't know how many times I can say this, and I don't know if I can ever say this enough, but everything that we're talking about is unfalsifiable. This all depends on, is there a God at the bottom of this that makes what you're saying, like, that makes this work? I don't think that this, I love this conversation, but this conversation ultimately depends on something that can't be proven or disproven. So
and therefore faith has to be placed one way or another. You have to place a bet on one of them.
Yes. And like I said at the beginning, I've placed my bet where I've placed it. And I think it comes down to a practical aspect. What makes things tick for people the best way? What makes society tick the best way? So I'm sure that the people watching your channel have not seen this video of mine, but I think it's one worth watching. It's called Atheism versus Theism. And I try and make the point there that humanity recognized that there was an issue and that a psychological God needed to be created. And it's this middle thing in between atheism and theism. It's a psychological theism. It's called post-theism. It's the acceptance that it's the appreciation of what the belief in God has done for culture, disregarding whether the thing that they believe in exists or not. And so it's a pragmatic question. It's a way of saying religion may be good and or useful, yes, even if it is not literally true in that sense. Yeah, I mean, so if we could just like take a step back and look at the world as we know it right now. Is there, you described very hedonistic, very selfish, very dark, logical extremes of what human behavior should look like if there is no overarching moral objective framing our existence. And my question to you is there a country right now in the world that you see living that way that's successful? Can you think of a single country that incentivizes a cutthroat social fabric where all you do is rip apart your neighbor, all you do is tear down the family next to you?
No, definitely not.
And that country is doing well on the world stage.
So what I would say is no internally, yes externally. So in other words, the Romans would take care and cooperate with one another.
Right.
But they would go in and kick the crap out of everybody else who got in their way. And they were not their brothers. They were their, slaves that they brought in for their own well-being. And so the potentially most successful civilization in human history was based on that model. Did it eventually fall? Yes, of course it did, but all nations do. So, and so to answer your question, no, I agree. I think that there is inherent in human beings the need for cooperation because our own well-being requires some level of cooperation with other humans.
Yeah. And that some level is a debate in and of itself. But imagine the very first group of hunter-gatherers. Instead of going out and hunting a buffalo, they slaughter each other. They leave one guy. He's not strong enough to hunt the buffalo. He dies. We came from these people. They are our ancestors. The ones who couldn't cooperate were easily picked out, were not well respected within their communities and didn't really have an opportunity to procreate and send people to be alive right now. So this whole the world should look like the logical extreme of this dark, cynical, there is no God worldview. It makes sense when you go down that logical, I'm going to say train instead of road, just to respect the train analogies that we have going on today. But you look at the world, you take a practical look at the world and you say, what are the top 10 countries? How do they incentivize their social fabric? And it's this intersubjective, to use that word again, it's this, can I minimize you to, how do I want to say this? Can I look at you and without knowing anything about you, trust you? No. I have to be able to condense you to something. And if I can condense you to, well, you believe in the same God that I do, then we create a global superpower, and that is called humanity. Essentially, you talk about the Romans, you talk about every single
Mongols,
group of humanity.
Aztecs,
Yes.
Vikings.
You have the Incas, you have all these different groups. Interestingly, they didn't divide themselves genetically. They divided themselves by, do you believe in the same God that I believe in? Which begs the question, how practical is the God belief? And I think it's very practical. I just don't think that it matters if the God thing is there underneath it, if you can all speak the same language with those around you. So I hope that I mean, I know that there are going to be flaws. I know that I'm not saying this perfectly, but that's kind of where I fall, where I think that what human beings did is we said, well, it's as if we have to interact with this thing, the spirit of humanity that lives in the future. It's a judge, right? I always use the 401k example. You put money in your 401k every month, and then one day you retire and voila, all of the money is there. All of the interest is there. You just had a fair dealing with what? Future of humanity? None of those people were giving out this money when you invested it in the first place. There was a transaction that happened on trust.
Yeah.
And that's part of the social fabric almost. And human beings, I think we evolved to create that. So, I mean, without just re-saying or bringing up other smaller points, I think that would be my main issue with the logical path. It's a logical path. I just don't think that that's what we see when we look at the world today. But yeah, we talked briefly about doing a part 2 because this is getting very long. So I think that we should do a part 2 and go into these things because I think that it's an interesting discussion and I think that it needs to be had.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be great. I think we should definitely do that. So, well, hey, I really enjoyed, our discussion today. Obviously it's getting pretty late, but I'll give you the final word. Any other things you want to touch on before we wrap up?
Let me look at my list of bullet points of how to talk to your family because we somehow got extremely sidetracked. I don't know how we did that.
Is anyone actually surprised though? I know I'm not.
I'm not at all. I always worry that I'm not going to be able to fill up an hour, and then I always go over an hour by a lot.
I've started realizing I do like 3 bullet points now instead of 20.
I had one that was kind of a hypothetical question that I used to ask and get interesting answers. I'll just ask it and then go check out my channel if you like ex-Mormons who disagree with you but are nice. This is a question that got asked to me that kind of got the ball rolling on my faith crisis, and I think this is an important question for both members and non-members to kind of ask each other to just kind of understand the ground rules of what's the purpose of this conversation. If you could open up an envelope, unfold some paper, and on the paper it said, the church is true, God is real, and this other thing is true. Joseph Smith was the prophet of the restoration. And you could know for a fact that those things are true, that because it's written on this paper, all of that is true. Would you want to open the paper? And the reason, and obviously the opposite would also be true, right? You could open up the envelope and say, there is no God, everything that is. but it wasn't created by somebody with intent. Would you want to open up that envelope? And I remember I found a theme, and I imagine, Jacob, that you will be an anomaly, but most of the people who I know who are still active in the church said, no, I don't want to know what the answer is because I want to have my comfort. And most of the people who I know who have left said, yes, I absolutely would want to know because I want to get to the truth. And I suspect that you would be on the truth side, but I don't think that that's predictive at all. But I just think that's an interesting kind of thought experiment. And I am curious what your answers would be.
Hayden, you go first.
Yeah. When you said that, I don't know, your conclusion, is this you asking active members of the church and getting a majority no?
Yeah. So I haven't. This is something that you could, like, at the beginning of the conversation. By the way, Hayden, can you hear me?
Yep. Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I'm hearing
Jacob
Hayden.
Hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. This is something that you could, you're starting to have this conversation with your family member, and you say, like, hey, I'm just curious, like, would you want to know? This is a great question for Mormons to ask their ex-Mormons. This is a better question for ex-Mormons to ask their, I'm about to drop what I think is a truth bomb on you. Are you okay with that? This is a great way to frame that question, but I'm curious what both of your answers are.
Absolutely, yes. How can you be consistent as a Latter-day Saint and say no? That makes no sense to me whatsoever.
I'm the exact same as Hayden. And frankly, the ones who say no, I'm greatly disappointed in you, because
it's been most of the people I've asked.
Yeah, which is disappointing, because, but I would say this, two things. First, Joseph Smith and all of your Brigham Young, they were like, look, we're about the truth ultimately. So like, find the truth. So that's disappointing to hear that they would say that, but I know why they might say it. I think a lot of people they're not familiar with the history and all the different details. And they are afraid of confronting it because they do worry that they might be deceived, let's say, or find things that they can't stomach. And that's very hard for them to sort of process. And maybe they don't feel ready to engage in that sort of a thing, you know what I mean? And so I know that there are a lot of members who are afraid to get into the weeds on stuff. And that, to some extent, I empathize with that. Yeah. Because I think faith is an uphill battle. I really do think that it is. And so if you're going to do things that are going to make it an even more uphill battle, that's a lot of times people have a hard time with that because it's already an uphill battle. But I'm personally of the opinion, but it doesn't matter.
Right.
The truth is what ultimately matters, and you seek it and you deal with it and you wrestle with it.
Yeah. I think the last thing that I wanted to just mention was if you know somebody, I'm speaking to your active subscriber base at the moment. If you know somebody who's going through a faith crisis at the moment, I can give you one. I mean, other than like they're someone that you care about and you should obviously have compassion for them, but I just want to try and put you into their headspace for one quick moment. Nietzsche talked about what would happen if a person was in a boat that sank. He said, it's not that you wouldn't trust that boat anymore. It's that you would never trust any boat ever again. And the same thing goes for people who are in relationships where they get cheated on or something like that. It's not that they don't trust that person anymore. It's that they don't trust the meta relationship. And a lot of the people who are in this situation, they not only do they not feel like they can trust the church, like the LDS church that we're talking about today, they don't know what they can trust anymore. They've lost so much trust, which, as we've kind of established in today's conversation, is such an important part of our social fabric. And so if you needed a reason to empathize with them and to be compassionate and to go easy on them and to let them know that there's a safe person that they can just talk about these things with, that would be my pitch to you. So I can't think of anything more that I would like to say. So that would be everything. And I appreciate you guys letting me come talk to you. I think it's been fun. We went longer than we thought that we would, but we're probably going to do this again, so it doesn't matter anyways. And yeah.
Awesome. Hey, any quick final thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, I just want to commend you for your willingness to talk with people who you disagree with. I think most people on both sides of the aisle, if I'm talking about Latter-day Saint and former member, most people aren't willing, like you mentioned before, most people aren't willing to put their face on the camera. Like, I don't blame you for originally saying, this is just a troll, you're not going to do it. Like, because most, and I'm not,
well, we're being particularly trolly.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, there's a reason for that. And I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm saying, even in my own experience, most people aren't willing. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had online, just typing, on the comment section and saying, hey, let's set up a conversation. And 99% of the time it's, no, I'm not interested in that for any amount of reasons. So anyway, thanks for being willing to do that, and hope we can continue this conversation and friendship.
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. Well, my final word here is just that everybody remember, ultimately, it's about, in my opinion, for Latter-day Saints, I can speak to you guys for sure. Ultimately, it's about maximizing relationships with people. Don't cut off your family or friends because they leave the church. Hold on to every part of the relationship that you can still hold on to. And don't do it with the intention of, oh, this is my tactic for bringing them back. Do it because a relationship is an end in and of itself. Love your fellow man, especially those who see the world a little different, and let things play out the way that they're going to play out. Thanks so much for coming on, and looking forward to future conversations. So do you enjoy the content here on Thoughtful Faith? If so, be sure to hit the notification bell. This ensures that our new videos show up on your feed. Also, be sure to check out our Facebook group called Thoughtful Saints, where myself and others discuss the sorts of topics found on this channel. And lastly, if you think other people would benefit from this video, please be sure to share it.